Good afternoon from Longleaf, Louisiana. I'm Everett Lueck, historian here at Southern Forest Heritage Museum. And this afternoon, after a hard day of working on the railroad, we're going to take a good look here at one of our prize exhibits, the railroad exhibits that is. We've talked about buildings and some other things. We're going to look at Red River and Gulf engine number 106. The 106 is 97 years old. It was made in 1923 by Baldwin Locomotive Works, and in 1953, 30 years after its birth, it powered the last steam-powered Red River and Gulf train in March of 1953. For 70 years, almost 67 years, it's been here in the car knocker shed and been stored pretty much undercover for that period of time. And so it's been, like I said, it's one of our prize exhibits. It's a beautiful engine. It is the second to last member of Baldwin's Class 1032D 10-wheelers. So for its age, the first 1032Ds were built about 1880, and that class lasted until 1923. It primarily was a freight locomotive. It didn't pull the mixed train. It pulled the mixed train in the end, but it was primarily a freight locomotive, and it was used from here to Kurthwood until 1945. And after 1945, it was used on the runs to LeCount and out in the woods to Meridian to pick up logs as the log train, bring the log train in from Meridian. About 3 or 4 years ago, we noticed up here in the shop that number 106 was beginning to sink. It was sinking into the floor of the shop. They had stored it on 35-pound rail. Ties had rotted out, and we had problems. At the same time, Mike Miller came on board the museum as our chief mechanical officer, and Mike and Tucker Baker, our roadmaster, and several others concocted a plan where we were able to get in. We found huge cracks in the floor. If you get on some of our pages on the website and on some of the other Facebook page, you'll see these cracks. Some of them were 6 inches wide and 10 or 12 feet deep. And we filled the cracks with concrete. Took 180 cubic feet of concrete to fill the cracks. Jacked the locomotive back up. Pieced the tracks back together. Laid some track out in front of it. And 2 years ago, October 2018, we were able to winch the locomotive out. The locomotive rolled like a dream. It was beautiful. We winched it out. Mike and his crew got in here and they completely laid down all new track, new rail, new ties, new ballast. The whole shed has been refurbished as far as the track goes, and the 106 sits on a solid foundation. At that point, Mike decided, and we all encouraged him, to start a cosmetic restoration of the locomotive because the locomotive had not been painted since 1951. However, it's not your average cosmetic restoration. Mike is restoring every appliance on the locomotive to where it is serviceable. Right now, the brake stands are out of the locomotive. He's rebuilding the brake stands. When his cosmetic restoration is done, all of the appliances will be functional. He's restored the hydrostatic lubricator. He's restored the inside of the cab. He and Glenn Amont and his grandson Wembley have just finished redoing the seats. Another one of our volunteers, Chuck Lynn, just finished the doors. Mike did the windows. This is basically going to be almost an operational restoration. Once Mike is done, all that will be left to do will be the boiler. Everything else will be done that this locomotive could run. And so we're very proud of the work that Mike has been doing. The engine, as you might suspect, has been indoors for more than 50 years. It's in beautiful condition. So let's walk around and take a little bit of a look at the engine. We're looking at the fireman's side of the locomotive here, which is where the cross-compound air pump is, which Mike will take off one of these days and make functional. This entire side of the locomotive has been renewed. We've had all the drive rods off of it. All the bearings have been polished, everything's been fixed here. The main rods are back on. We've actually dealt with the pistons and the valves. It's been quite an expensive and quite an interesting operation. We have found that the engine's been in a couple of accidents, but that's kind of normal. There's a break in the frame right there. There's another one up there that have been welded up over the years. That's pretty much normal for steam locomotives. We know of a couple accidents that it was in. But the engine itself, as you can see, it's a beautiful machine. It is a gorgeous machine. Right now the air tanks are off. They're down here on the ground. Mike has been working on them. And Wembley found the whistle, and we've mounted its original whistle up on top. The headlight's off right now, being refurbished. Working on that as well. And the engine is in remarkable condition. It just is simply a magnificent piece of engineering. And Glenn, who works with Wembley's grandfather, was telling me today, he said, I'm just amazed for a 100-year-old machine how solid this thing is. And I know there's a great deal of discussion among trained people as to who built the best machine, whether it was Baldwin or Lima or various parts of Alco, but Baldwin was always called the Ironworks. And this machine is one tough piece of iron. So this is, 106, and it's just we're just excited about all the work that Mike has been doing. Another year, and this engine is going to be just almost perfect. We're very proud of it. Well, I'm up in the cab right now, and I'm playing fireman on a hot day on the Red River and Gulf. The cab door would have been open for ventilation. Gives me a really good look down the railroad, better than I get with the door closed. The window's open, and it's 95 outside, so it's about 130 degrees in the cab. But the cab's in great shape. Mike's redone all the wood in here. He's working on the gauges. He's finished the gauges. He's finished the turret. He's finished the hydrostatic lubricator. A lot of other things to do, but the fireman would sit over here, his hands on the firing valve. He's got an injector right up in front of him to put water in the engine. And right in front of him is the atomizer to control the oil fire and how it works in the engine. So, Mike is just making a remarkable job of this restoration. A couple things have been interesting, though, as part of this restoration. I told you this engine's been in a couple of accidents. If we could take a nice picture of the engineer's side, which we can't, because the shed's up against it. In 1943, a whole carload consisting of 2 families of war workers, parents, children, and grandchildren, ran into the side of 102 in a thunderstorm just north of Longleaf. All but 2 of the grandchildren were killed. Didn't even, only fatal accident that the 106 was ever involved in that we know about. And it wasn't a train accident, it was a car accident. They just ran into the side of the locomotive. Very sad day in the history of the Red River and Gulf. I'm standing here in the gangway. On the apron's gone right now because Mike's working on the apron. But I'm standing in the gangway between the 106, the engine, and the tender. And if you think about it, all kinds of firemen over the years, every time somebody's ready to take a picture of the locomotive, the fireman suddenly finds himself here in the gangway with his arms resting on the armrest, because that's where he gets a good picture taken. So I'm kind of imitating the firemen from days gone by. In the process of working on the locomotive here, there was some always, interesting things that you find out in the various history as things goes on. But Mike was working here on the tender and looking one day, and the sun hit the tender just right. Underneath the Red River and Gulf Railroad letters, it says Crowell and Spencer Lumber Company Limited. On the back, underneath the 106, it says 300. This is the tender from Kroll Longleaf Lumber, Kroll and Spencer, then Kroll Longleaf Lumber, but never relettered, number 300. In 1951, apparently the 106's tender tank was worn out. Number 300 was in better shape. So they just simply swapped the tenders. Painted the engine again, painted the tender, and the tender from the number 300 exists today, whereas the 106's tender does not. As you can see, Mike has put a lot of effort into the 106. He's basically about 1/3 of the way done. In a year or two, probably will be all done. But none of this happens without money. Several people have donated some pretty good money. Mike has had a fundraiser and gotten some money. But we would certainly welcome any more donations to getting the cosmetic restoration of the 106 done. When Mike finishes, like I said before, all of the appliances will be rebuilt, overhauled, and tested. Every piece of this locomotive, except for the boiler, will have been basically restored to operating condition. And so, what happens after that, we don't know yet. But on the other hand, this engine will be in remarkable condition. Funds are always required. And if you can help us restore the 106, get on our website, the museum's website, forestheritagemuseum.org, and give us some money to help out with the 106. It's the last living link that we have here at the museum with the Red River and Gulf Railroad. Thank you very much.